Time or task management is one of the most important skills that you can learn to be successful, and to also, more importantly, spend the time doing the things that you actually want to do. The issue, however, is it's incredibly overwhelming. I've tried endless time or task management systems in the past, and none of them have stuck. They always end up being too high friction to actually use, or just being overrun with random tasks to complete. So over the past few years, I've slowly built up a 3-step system to time and task management. A system that's helped me graduate in the top 0.1% of Australia, but more importantly, help me live the life that I want to live. When you first start forming a task management system, you need to start simple. The reason for this is you need to make it easy for yourself to build the habit of actually managing your tasks. And so step 1 of the 3-step system is to just build a very basic to-do list. If you're already doing this, you can skip to step 2 to get some more advanced tips. But if you're currently not using any task management system, it's vital that you start simple and just start collecting an incredibly simple to-do list. This can be on the Notes app on your phone. I'm going to be using some examples here on Notion, but it doesn't really matter where it is. All that matters is that you actually use it. And so you can just offload random tasks that come up through the day and then use it to come back to when you're trying to remember what to work on, and then slowly tick through the things as you complete them. It's not rocket science, but it's the first step to building a proper system, and it's vital that you start offloading all of those tasks from your mind onto some external piece of information. This will not only ensure that you forget less things, but it'll also enable you to do step 2 and step 3 of this process. And to make this process easier, make sure that it's really simple to access this to-do list so you can really quickly bring it up throughout the day. Maybe you have a shortcut on your phone, or you just use the Notes app, whatever it is, make it incredibly easy to use. And try and have a recurring time when you get home that you look over this to-do list. Once you form the habit of using a very simple, basic to-do list, you can move on to the second step where you start actually organizing your tasks. This is where you add extra properties to further define the task at hand and to make it a lot easier to actually complete and prioritize your tasks. In this step, it is pivotal that you don't add too many extra fields to define, because the more things you have to actually define for a task, the higher the friction in the system and the higher the probability that you're slowly going to actually stop using that system. And so you only want to add the things that you actually genuinely need. And this is usually an issue with a lot of the task management apps, where they'll come preset with lots of fields to fill in, and then it's going to become overwhelming very quickly. However, it's still important that you go to step 2, because having just a basic to-do list can get out of hand incredibly quickly, and you'll end up with a huge long list of tasks and there's no prioritization, and it once again becomes very overwhelming. And so the key is to find that middle ground where you organize your tasks, but only based on the things that genuinely actually provide you value. And for me, that's adding 3 key features to my task management system. The first is a more nuanced way to actually track the status of my tasks. Often I find that a very basic to-do list like this doesn't characterize the nuances of the progression that tasks usually take in my day-to-day life. And so the first thing I added was a better way to keep track of the status of a task. The first status I like to add is what I call the backlog. This is a place for me to just collect random tasks that pop up throughout my life. And it means that I can be a lot more nonchalant about what tasks I add, because I can just throw them into the backlog and I don't have to organize them just yet. And then when I get to the point where I'm going to start completing some of these tasks, I can look through these tasks and prioritize which ones I want to work on, and then move them over to this ordered list where I can order them based on the order that I want to complete them. And then I can go one by one and move them over to this focus status. And this focus status is the one task that I'm going to be working on right now, and ensures that I don't switch between multiple different tasks and have a very singular focus to get a lot more deep work in. And then once I finish that task, I can move it to done. And you'll notice there's 2 other statuses here as well. The first one is cancelled, when I've figured out that this task doesn't actually have to be done. And the second one is a very important one called waiting, because a lot of the time I still need to do a task, but I'm actually waiting on something else to be done, something outside of my control. Maybe I'm waiting on a colleague to finish a part of a report, or I'm waiting for my teacher to provide feedback. Whatever it is, a lot of the time you're actually waiting, and so I'll have a section here, and then once that piece of information has been provided, then I can move it either to the ordered list or straight to the focus section. And so that's the first feature I like to add to my task management system, a more nuanced way of keeping track of the statuses of my tasks. And I like to visually organize it in this Kanban board style, rather than a dry base table. The second feature is you need a good way to prioritize what tasks do you take from the backlog to this ordered list. How do you actually order your tasks in level of priority? And so you need a clear and simple prioritization system. And for this, I like to use the Eisenhower matrix method, where you assign the importance and the urgency of that task, and then based off the importance and urgency, you prioritize your task. So if something is both highly important and highly urgent, well, it's your first priority. This system ensures that you don't just prioritize solely based off urgency, which is our human nature, where usually we're just going to do the thing that's on the top of our mind. And by doing this, we also ensure that we prioritize based off importance. One nuance here is I like to actually have 3 categories for importance, where I have low, medium, and high, and similarly for urgency, because I found when I just try to do urgent or non-urgent, I would end up saying pretty much everything is urgent or everything is important. So I like this 3-level system, which makes it a little bit easier to categorize things. And the final feature I like to add is adding specificity and notes to my tasks. So you might have noticed here that I call this a project list rather than a to-do list. And the reason for that is usually when you're working on something, you'll work on projects. You're not just doing tiny 5-minute to-do list items. You're usually working on, say, an assignment or an entire piece of homework. And so I like to think of that more as a project because it's effectively a collection of lots of small to-do items. And so I like to have a project list, and then within each of these projects, I can then write up all of the sub to-do lists or tasks. And the key thing here is to be incredibly specific with your tasks. Try and get it to the point where you're effectively breaking it down to tasks that you'll do every 5 to 15 minutes. Because if you have a very vague goal, it's going to be a lot harder to focus when you actually try and work on that project. And so spend some time before you start working to define all the things you need to do. So for this example, maybe you're writing a rationale for a part of your assignment. You can break it down into the specific granular step-by-step details that you're going to need to follow. Maybe you need to open Google Scholar, search this specific term, try and find 3 to 4 research papers, take those research papers, upload them to AI, and so on and so forth. That way you know exactly what to do and you can get into that flow state when you're working. And so I usually like to do this when I move over a project into the focus block, right before I start working on it. A second characteristic I like to add is just a notes section where I can just jot down random things while I'm working, just to help me organize my thoughts. And so those are the key features that I like to add to my task management system. And the thing is, like I said, only add the things you need. If you have set deadlines, you can add in another deadlines block. If you like to categorize your tasks based off the area of your life that they actually apply to, you can add a life domain category. But don't just add in tons and tons of things that you're never going to use. The system I just laid out is going to be enough for 90% of people to get 90% of the benefit of task management. However, if you want to go one step further and further optimize your task management system, there's one more thing that you can do, and that is time blocking your tasks. Rather than just having an ordered list and sequentially going through those tasks, it can be incredibly beneficial if you reflect on exactly when you're going to be doing those tasks every day. This can help, number 1, put a sense of urgency on the completion of that task, and number 2, actually help you be more realistic when you're prioritizing what you're going to be able to get done that day. And ultimately, it can just make it a lot more motivating and a lot easier to overcome procrastination. So once again, there's tons and tons of ways you can do this, but I'll show you one example that I find works for me. So what I'll do is randomly throughout the day, whenever I think of a task, I'll just add it to this backlog over here. And then the morning of every day, I'll go through and I'll assign the importance and urgency to those tasks and use that to prioritize the order of tasks that I should be completing. I'll now look at my day and set a daily highlight, the one thing which I need to ensure I get done. 90% of the time, it's going to be the top thing on your ordered list. However, occasionally, it might be another life event happening. But it's the one priority which I want to ensure that I get done. And then I'll choose another set of optional side quests. Usually a couple of these tasks down here. Things which would be nice to get done, but would be a bonus on top of my daily highlight. With that in mind, I'll now take these tasks and put them in my calendar. The nice thing with Notion is you can have quite a seamless workflow to make this possible. Obviously, if you'd like, you can just pull up Google Calendar and rewrite those tasks. But in Notion, you can just come here and you can add a field called time block. And then I'll set that to be done today. And I'll do this for all of the tasks that I was planning on doing today. You can then jump over to Notion Calendar and link up that specific table of tasks. And you'll see here that now it's at this top bar over here. So task 1, task 2, and complete chapter 7 homework. And so now I'll come and drag this and actually populate my schedule. So the key thing here is that you prioritize your daily highlight. You want to put it at the start of the day because you need to get it done first. It's your highlight for the day. It's your non-negotiable. And so you want to do it towards the start of the day. And the benefit of this is you also usually have a lot more energy at the start of the day. And then you can try and fit in your other tasks towards the end. When you're scheduling your later side quests towards the end of the day, it can also be beneficial to think about your energy levels at that time of day and what task would be most suitable. Because occasionally some of your side quests will be things that give you energy or maybe don't require much energy. And it's good to put those towards the evening because that's usually when people are a lot more tired and have less energy. So try and be strategic about how you organize your time. Another incredibly important thing here is when you start time blocking your tasks, you want to do it in such a way that is realistic but also motivating. So what I mean there is a lot of people when they start time blocking their task are going to be really over eager. I'll be like, I'll finish that in an hour and then smash this out. I can probably get that done in an hour and then I'll get this all done. And you'll end up booking in way more than you can actually do. And the issue with this is it's actually going to end up demotivating you because you'll not finish task 1 and you'll completely derail your entire schedule. You have to move everything around and it's just a complete mess. And so you still need to be realistic and give yourself enough time to complete that task. And so it's usually good to try and give yourself a lot more time than you think is actually going to be needed. Because a lot of the time we'll underestimate the time it takes to complete a task. But you don't want to go too far because the work you have to do will usually fill the amount of time that you give it. So if I say assign 3 hours to this one task, what it can do is it can maybe demotivate me. Maybe I'm like, oh, it's easy to get that done in 3 hours. And then you don't really work that quickly and you don't develop that deep focus state. And so there's this balance here of being realistic so that you don't derail your day and actually demotivate yourself, but also not being overly generous so that you don't feel rushed and you don't actually focus when you work. And so the balance I like to do is I like to schedule a task and set quite an ambitious time to finish it. Still doable, but ambitious, and I would have to actually focus very deeply to get it done in that time. But then I'll set a buffer after that and I'll give myself a 25% window afterwards in case I don't actually finish it in that time. This ensures that I have a set ambitious deadline which motivates me, but also buffer my calendar in case it doesn't actually get done so it doesn't derail my day. And so it's that balance of motivation versus being realistic. And for me, that's a system that's worked best, setting motivating deadlines but with a time buffer afterwards. So that is my 3-step system to building a task management system that works. I'll leave the Notion template for all of those 3 steps in the description below. And if you want to continue learning about spending your time doing the things that you genuinely want to do and building your dream routine, then you can check out this video about creating and actually following your dream daily routine. And if you want more content like this, feel free to subscribe.